Steelers Nation, you might want to turn the volume up, because the NFL world just got hit with one of those moments that makes you stop scrolling, lean forward, and ask, did he really just say that? It wasn't in a press conference. It wasn't an official team announcement. It wasn't even a classic breaking news tweet from an insider. No, this one came casually, almost too casually, from one of the NFL's biggest names during a podcast conversation that was supposed to be about everything except football. And yet, with just a few words, Odell Beckham Jr. managed to send a shockwave through Pittsburgh and across every corner of Steelers Nation. The scene was laid back, OBJ sitting across from Bill Maher on Club Random, sipping, laughing, telling stories about life, his career, his travels. It was classic Beckham, charismatic, confident, effortlessly cool for most of the interview. The talk was lighthearted, family, fame, a few playful jabs about his time in New York and Los Angeles. But then Maher, half smiling, tossed in a question about where OBJ might play next. It wasn't loaded. It wasn't framed as a headline grabber, but the way OBJ answered, that's what lit the fuse. He leaned back, grinned that knowing grin, and said, "Man, I've been talking to a few people. Pittsburgh's one of them." It was just one sentence. But in the NFL, one sentence from the right player is enough to set an entire city on fire. Within seconds, clips of the moment were flying across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Steelers fans were clipping, reposting, captioning it in bold letters, "Pittsburgh's one of them." The quote was everywhere, and just like that, a random Sunday night podcast became the epicenter of the biggest Steelers rumor of the offseason. The first wave of reaction was pure adrenaline. Some fans couldn't even contain themselves. OBJ in black and gold. Let's go. Others were already imagining him catching deep passes at Acrisure Stadium, the terrible towels waving, the crowd losing its mind. But there was another layer to the reaction: curiosity, because this wasn't a name that had been seriously linked to Pittsburgh in recent weeks. The Steelers' offseason focus had been elsewhere, bolstering defense, tightening the offensive line. A big-name receiver like Beckham wasn't in the headlines, and yet here he was, putting Pittsburgh's name in his own mouth on a massive public platform. So the questions began. Was he joking? Was it a throwaway comment? Or was this a calculated little drop? A teaser meant to stir the waters and see how the city would respond. It's important to understand why even the idea of Beckham in Pittsburgh hits differently. This is a man who has been one of the most electrifying receivers in football since his rookie year. A highlight machine whose one-handed catches are burned into NFL history. He's been a Super Bowl champion, a Pro Bowler, a cultural icon whose influence stretches far beyond the field. Sure, injuries have taken their toll in recent seasons. And yes, he's bounced between teams, but when OBJ is healthy, there are still few in the game who can change a scoreboard and a crowd's energy the way he can. That's why the moment his comment hit social media, insiders started chiming in. NFL Network's late-night shows were replaying the clip. Beat reporters from both Pittsburgh and other cities began digging, checking their contacts, looking for even the smallest sign that the Steelers and Beckham had been in real talks. ESPN's bottom ticker ran the quote with a question mark at the end, as if inviting viewers to start dreaming. Meanwhile, in the Steelers' own corner of the internet, the speculation machine went into overdrive. Fan accounts posted mock-up graphics of OBJ in a Steelers jersey, his signature one-handed catch reimagined against a backdrop of black and gold. YouTube channels fired up emergency live streams, debating whether he'd fit into Mike Tomlin's system. Even former players weighed in, some with excitement, others with cautious let's-see takes. And while the public was buzzing, there were whispers behind the scenes. Word started circulating that OBJ's connection to Pittsburgh wasn't just random. A couple of current Steelers players had crossed paths with him in off-season workouts. One or they had even been seen training together in Los Angeles earlier this year. Then there was the Aaron Rodgers factor. If we're talking about the real 2025 Steelers roster, OBJ and Rodgers have mutual respect, and Rodgers is the kind of QB who can sell a receiver on a vision. If those conversations happen, and the hints suggest they might have, then Beckham's comment may have been less of a tease and more of a breadcrumb. Still, the mystery hangs over it. OBJ didn't elaborate. He didn't list the other teams he mentioned. He didn't say, "I want to go to Pittsburgh," but he didn't deny it either. And if there's one thing Odell knows, it's how to control a narrative. For now, Steelers Nation is left doing what they do best. Talking, debating, dreaming. Is this a realistic move? Could the Steelers afford him under the cap? Would Tomlin even want a personality as big as OBJ's in the locker room, or would he embrace it? Knowing Beckham's energy could electrify the offense, those are the conversations happening in bars, living rooms, and group chats across Pittsburgh right now. One thing's for sure, whether it was a slip, a strategy, or just a superstar having fun with the Mick, OBJ has given the Steelers offseason a shot of pure adrenaline. And with every replay of that grin and that sentence, Pittsburgh's one of them. The possibilities feel just a little more real, because sometimes in the NFL, the biggest moves start with the smallest hints, and if Beckham's hint turns into headlines, Steelers Nation, you might be looking at one of the most electric wide receiver rooms in the league. And this was only the beginning. The hours after OBJ's tease were unlike anything Steelers Nation had experienced in months. What had started as a casual throwaway line on a podcast was now a full-blown obsession. Twitter feeds that usually mix Penguins highlights and Pirates box scores had been taken over entirely by debates about Odell Beckham Jr. Instagram reels were looping the same-for-second clip of him smiling and saying, "Pittsburgh's one of them," as if analyzing it for hidden meaning could somehow reveal his next move. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the fan base had split into camps, but not in the usual pessimistic versus optimistic way. No, this was different. This was the passionate divide of people who wanted OBJ in black and gold now and people who really wanted OBJ in black and gold, but were too superstitious to say it out loud. There was almost no outright opposition. Even those cautious about his injury history couldn't deny that the thought of him lining up in Acrisure Stadium sent a charge through their spined-out Steelers Facebook groups were running, wild with hypothetical depth charts, OBJ alongside George Pickens, Calvin Austin III, and Pat Freiermuth as the tight end, all being fed by Aaron Rodgers. Just reading it out loud sounded ridiculous, like the kind of thing you'd build in Madden after turning off the salary cap rules. And yet, here it was, sitting in the middle of every sports conversation in Western Pennsylvania. ESPN's morning shows fed the frenzy. Analysts in tailored suits and flashy ties spoke in low, measured tones as they rolled the tape. One segment host, clearly enjoying the chaos, asked the panel, "Be honest, if Rodgers has OBJ and Pickens, are we talking about a legitimate AFC favorite?" The responses were instant and animated. Absolutely, without a doubt. Defenses can't double everyone. And the stat packages followed. Beckham's catch percentage when targeted 20 yards downfield, his red zone efficiency, his Super Bowl highlight reel, all of it reminding fans that, yes, the man can still play. But then came the twist, and it didn't come from a sports desk or a blog. It came from a source close to the locker room, someone who'd been right before, according to this source. OBJ's Pittsburgh comment wasn't random. In fact, it came after quiet conversations with at least the Steelers veterans who had told him exactly what playing in Pittsburgh would mean, on and off the field. One of those veterans, George Pickens himself. The two had reportedly crossed paths at an off-season training camp in Miami earlier this year. The chemistry, they said, was instant. The source went further, suggesting that OBJ's interest had less to do with money and more to do with culture. He'd seen enough in his career to know that where you play, the locker room environment, the leadership from the top down, the fan base, can be as important as the contract itself. At Pittsburgh, under Mike Tomlin, had a reputation for stability that few NFL franchises could match. That tidbit hit social media like lighter fluid on an open flame. Now, fans weren't just talking about OBJ as a flashy signing. They were talking about him as someone who fit, someone who could actually buy into the culture, rather than clash with it. Suddenly, the hypothetical became a little more believable. Of course, not everyone was ready to believe the fairy tale just yet. A few analysts pumped the brakes, reminding viewers that OBJ still had suitors elsewhere, and that the Steelers' cap situation wasn't exactly flush with spare millions. But every time a doubter spoke, the counter-arguments came flooding back. Pittsburgh had found ways to make big moves before, Patrick Queen's arrival being the most recent reminder, and they'd do it again if the front office truly wanted a player. The more the hours passed, the more the what-if began to feel like a why not. OBJ's name trended nationally for 14 hours straight. Local businesses jumped in on the fun, with a bakery in the Strip District offering OBJ black and gold cookies. and a sports bar promising free wings if the signing actually happened. Inside the Steelers facility, the chatter was quieter, but no less charged. Players didn't speak on the record, but the smiles in the hallways and the side glances during warm-ups told their own story. Even Coach Tomlin, in his usual press conference, poker face, cracked the faintest grin when a reporter asked about Beckham. "We're always looking to improve our football team," was all he said. The kind of line that says nothing, but feels like it says everything. And then came the moment that took this from speculative fun to outright fever pitch. Beckham himself liked a fan-made Instagram post of him in a Steelers uniform. No caption, no comment, just a like. But in today's NFL, that single tap of a finger was as good as a press release for some fans. Screenshots spread faster than wildfire. Even NFL memes pages joined in, photoshopping him standing next to Rodgers under a headline that read, "Nightmare, fuel for the AFC North." That's when it hit home, whether or not the signing ever happens. Beckham had already accomplished something powerful. He'd reminded Steelers Nation of that raw, contagious energy that only comes from dreaming big, from imagining the roar of 65,000 people as a new star takes the field, from picturing the moment under the stadium lights when Beckham hauls in a one-handed catch on the sideline and the place goes absolutely berserk if the deal happens. It could mark the beginning of one of the most explosive offenses Pittsburgh has seen in years. If it doesn't, it will still go down as one of the most thrilling offseason teases in recent memory. Either way, OBJ's words have already left a mark, and maybe, just maybe, that was the plan all along. A calculated, charismatic nudge to the fan base, a way to say, keep watching, you never know what's coming next. Because in Pittsburgh, hope isn't just a feeling, it's a tradition, and right now, thanks to one sentence on a podcast, hope is wearing number 13 in black and gold, at least in the minds of every fan who's dared to picture it.